Oh my God. Hey, everybody. So, this is episode 16 of I Swear to Junk I'm Not God. And we are going to have a gnarly one. I'm going to be honest. This one is like way worse than Carl Panzram. And also we have back by popular demand. Kirrah Park is my sister's here. Bam. Yay. Ow. I need one of those horns like on drink champs.
Like when people like get on WGCI and
exactly.
Birthday and shit.
Yep. Just like that. So I hope you enjoyed last episode on Carl Panzram. That was 2 hours long, but it was, the most beautiful 2 hours you could ever listen to. I've gotten so much freaking, love and appreciation for me and Kirrah being able to find some humor in that.
Are you serious?
Chaos, yeah.
I thought it was just you. Honestly,
you think I'm the only person that listens to my podcast?
No.
The fuck?
I thought you were the only one that was like, you need to come back.
No.
I am listening to this and it is good.
No, not at all.
That's sweet.
Not at all. So this is episode 16. We're going to be doing Albert Fish. And what are we drinking? We're doing the Tequila Sour. This is actually an egg white based drink. If you're vegan and you don't want to use egg whites, then don't. I'm sure it'll still be marvelous. So what that is 2 parts tequila. You can use Reposado. We use Blanco. A 3/4 part lime juice, a 1/4 part lemon juice, and 1/2 part simple syrup. We use agave nectar because girlish figure, guys. So you put all of that shit in a cocktail shaker. You shake it for 15 to 30 seconds until the eggs are frothy, if you're using egg white, or until it is chilled. And then you strain it and pour it into a rocks glass. And boom, you got your motherfucking self a egg white tequila sour. So you're welcome. All right, who are we talking about? We're talking about Albert Fish, the gray man.
Should we do a trigger warning?
Yeah. Because
it involves a lot of child molestation.
Yeah.
And some real sick shit.
Yeah.
So I think we should have a trigger warning.
Yeah.
If you all are squeamish, and not actually into the idea of hearing about brutally raping
and murdering babies and kids and shit. Yeah.
Perhaps this one's not the one for you.
Perhaps, but you should listen to it anyway.
Because honestly, okay, I gotta say that I think Albert Fish is probably in my top 5, and
of
probably
grossness.
Only real sick people have like their favorite serial killers.
Yeah,
but it's kind of just like
probably.
I think it's like up there with Jack the Ripper for me, because you know how I feel about Jack the Ripper. Like I just think they're fascinating, and I think it's because like it kind of makes you wonder, like, how do people get this fucking sick? And it's unique to be that sick. So then you're kind of like, wow,
there's somebody out there that's literally this sick.
That's literally terrifying. And I learned about Albert Fish when I was listening to Morbid.
Shout out to Morbid, Elena and Ashley, because
one of the best.
They did 4 parts on Albert Fish. Elena and Ash, are 1, incredibly funny. And 2, Elena especially, no disrespect to Ash because she's thorough as well, but Elena is the one that typically does the multi-parters. She got deep down and dirty into Albert Fish. I will say though, with Morbid, there were a couple of things that she didn't want to touch on, which I understand because she has children. We don't.
Nope.
That doesn't make the crimes any better for us to read about, obviously, but she didn't want to do certain things. Like she didn't want to read the letters and she didn't, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. And I think she read some things, but then there was just some she couldn't even bring herself to read. I'm reading everything. And I'm reading everything that I found because honestly, if I did read everything that he sent out to people, I would never be done. And I don't want to do 4 parts. I don't even want to I mean, I don't know that this won't be a two-parter, but I don't even really want to do a multi-parter on Albert Fish. He's just that fucking gross. He's just that gross. But I do understand what you're saying too when you say like, yo, it's not like he's your favorite person.
No, not. I don't even know the man.
But it's just like when it comes to just like topic and fascination, he's fascinating. I mean, he was a, to me, especially, and they, if I'm not mistaken, they actually use this term in the book that I read by Harold Schechter. I read this book called Deranged, The Shocking True Story of America's Most Fiendish Killer. This isn't the first time I've read Harold Schechter, because Harold Schechter also did an extreme dive into H.H. Holmes. So I actually read some of his work when I was researching H.H. Holmes. And I didn't rely on him completely because I was reading a book by Adam Selzer for H.H. Holmes. And Adam Selzer is a Chicago local historian. And I'd rather get the information from a Chicago local historian than Harold Schechter. That was just like my opinion. So, but in this book, they called Albert Fish like psychologically a phenomenon because he was so perverse. And he had every perversion under the sun, so we're going to talk about that. And, honestly, just like with anybody else, like none of this information feels good to talk about. I want to preface that because a lot of people are like, well, true crime's your thing. Just like, yeah, motherfucker, but I'm probably one of the dopest and nicest people though.
Yo, thanks.
You know what I mean?
I also like to go to Target.
Yeah, it's like I do. It's like I don't murder people, but I've always been fascinated with psychology. And I think I mentioned it on another episode. I literally did a science project in the 8th grade called What is Mental Illness?
Oh, I remember that.
And so I was like super obsessed with trying to understand why people's minds work the way that they work. And it just so happens that serial killers, because they are the very extreme version of that level of psychopathy, they're fascinating. So, if you're one of those people that persecute people because they listen to true crime and shit, I know there's a lot of Instagram reels and shit. It's like, women love true crime. Like, why do women love true crime? It's like, we love true crime because we're fascinated by how these people think.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. Like when I was listening to the Carl Panzram episode and we were just kind of like, it's not funny. Because it was like, it wasn't funny. But then it was like, it's just wild that this is how people think. You know what I mean? Like that's what made certain shit funny. It's like, this is how they justify some of these behaviors back then. And then some of what they didn't know about psychology, like the ignorance too, they're just interesting topics. So it's not that Albert Fish is our favorite person. He's our favorite topic because he was a wild boy. So,
oh God, he was strange.
Sip.
I hate when my drinks are across the room.
Why do you keep doing that? All right.
Yeah.
While Kirrah gets her drink,
yeah.
and I adjust my mic. Ay.
Okay, so my cat jumped on my head this morning.
Yep.
From the bathroom door. Mm-hmm. So if you hear me shrieking in pain, it's just me and my neck.
Okay. Just the
it's
neck.
Nothing serious. It'll be fine.
Wait, did he scratch it? She?
No.
Okay.
She just landed on my skull with her all 4 of her paws. And then she went, wow.
She like, bitch.
Right. I'm like, what the fuck did I do?
All right. Okay. So welcome to episode 16. We're on it. Let's do it. Now, I'm just trying to collect myself because we're on a, we got a lot of pages, so we're on a wild ride here. All right. I was about to say, so Carl Panzram. No. Wrong
okay.
Psycho.
Time is nothing. It means nothing.
What is time? Time is nothing. Okay. All right. So Albert Fish was born Hamilton Fish in Washington, D.C. on May 19th, 1870, which makes him a fucking Taurus.
Are we surprised?
He's on the Gemini end, though. That's different.
Are we surprised? Because, like, if it turns out that Chris Brown were Albert Fish,
what?
I'd be like, damn, that makes sense. Or if there were any relation.
Oh. Okay.
Chris Brown is also
he may be a little psycho. Yeah. I can see that.
Talented but psycho.
Sexual. I think the sexual part Okay. So May 19th.
Delusion.
May 19th, 1870. He's the youngest child of Randall, a 32nd degree Mason and a boat captain. His father was of Old English background with family coming from Maine back in the day. His mother, Ellen Fish, she was Scots-Irish. She was 43 years younger than his father. His father was 75 years old when Albert was born. Too goddamn old.
That's why he's crazy.
He's straight Al Pacino.
Oh.
He's
Ow.
He also had 3 siblings. Walter, Annie, both of
Family
the names of our
names.
grandparents, and Edwin, not a name of a grandparent. Because if it was Benny, I would have just shot myself.
I would have done this episode.
It's like, fuck this episode.
Like, actually, I'll be on the next one. Too embarrassing.
Actually, I'm not coming. He would eventually change his name to Albert because he was too tired of being called ham and eggs by the other school children. Albert was the name of his deceased brother who passed away from brain disease. So Fish's family had a long line of mental illness. This would come out much, much later. Sorry, I'm adjusting my mic again. Sorry. Quote, in 2 generations, Dr. Wortham, who was an expert psychologist, later on explained, Fish's brothers and sisters and the brothers and sisters of his parents, the doctor had discovered no less than 7 cases of extreme psychopathology, including a paternal uncle who suffered from a religious psychosis, a half-brother who was confined to a state hospital for the insane, a younger brother who died of hydrocephalus, which is what Fish call water on the brain. That's the brother that had a brain disease. And a sister, in Fish's words, had some sort of mental affliction. Fish's mother, too, was regarded by her neighbors as very queer, in as much she heard noises on the street and saw things. So I think
never should have had kids.
She shouldn't have had kids. I think it's safe to say that his mother was schizophrenic. Now, Albert's father passed away when he was 5 years old. Quote, my father dropped dead October 15th, 1875 in the old Pennsylvania station where President Garfield was shot, and I was placed in St. John's Orphanage in Washington. The old man paused and let out a theatrical sigh. Quote, I was there till I was nearly 9, and that's where I got started wrong. We were unmercifully beat, whipped. I saw boys doing many things they should not have done. Albert's experience at the orphanage was very, very important because it definitely showed how he was. He dates his earliest sexual abnormalities to this time. Quote, he described to me very vividly, this is from the psychologist, that in that place, not only did the inmates commit all sorts of sensory acts with each other, in which he joined, but it made the greatest impression on him. One of the guardians there, a sister or teacher, had the habit of frequently whipping the boys and taking 6 at a time and having them strip and having one see what happened to the others. He remembers very vividly seeing the other boys whipped, and he recalls that before the age of 7, he had his first sexual feeling. And what did he get that feeling from? Asked Dempsey. This was Fish's attorney. From being whipped himself and from seeing other boys whipped and screaming. Before 7? So, Fish's mom comes back. No,
don't sound good.
It doesn't. Okay, so Fish's mom comes back after getting a government job. And so she's like, look, I'm feeling like I can handle this whole mom thing. And, you know, now she's a widow with 6 fucking kids. She's like, yo, I need
And she's schizophrenic.
And
so
she's
got like 12 kids.
Yeah, she's like, my brain is wild, but I need to work. So, but Fish, you know, she would eventually return. So he would be pulled out of the orphanage. But Fish would also suffer from something called enuresis, which is bedwetting. I just called it bedwetting my whole life, but that's what it's called. He suffered with that until he was 11. He was incredibly sensitive. He said, quote, I can tell you that to the best of my medical knowledge, this was the doctor, I'm sorry. To the best of my medical knowledge, every sexual abnormality that I have ever heard of, this man has practiced. Not only has he thought about it, not only has he daydreamed about it, he has also practiced it.
Do we think that he was also teased at school for bedwetting?
This is what I know about bedwetting. Bedwetting happens a lot for kids who are victims of molestation and sexual abuse. I think it's multi-tier in that sometimes children are afraid to get up and go to the bathroom, so they just pee in their beds.
Yeah.
They don't want to be awake.
Yeah.
But then there's a sexual part of it, the actual act of urinating.
Yeah.
And I think if he had all of these sexual experiences and having all these sexual feelings, you know what I mean? Maybe he was like masturbating, and accidentally peed on himself. I mean, he was 11. All of it comes out the same hole. So
I mean, but also like if he's being called ham and eggs at school, I'm sure he probably smelled like pee.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm sure that went around.
Well, he was being called ham and eggs because his name was Hamilton.
Right.
But yeah, it's possible. Totally. I did an episode on Alton Coleman, who was the dude that Mama was really afraid of when she was little.
Mama was really afraid of Son of Sam too.
Yeah, like a motherfucker. He was another one. He bedwetted. But his grandmother used to call him Pissy, which low key just remind me of our grandmother. But
that's not funny.
But Alton Coleman he grew up in a brothel where he would have menage a trois with his mother and his grandmother. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Sometimes the call comes from inside the house.
Straight up. So, in short, Fish was a sadist, but his prime sexual interest was pedophilia. So children 5 to 16 years old. He was most definitely a homosexual. He would just use women to seem quote unquote normal, because obviously men at that time were marrying women and having children with women.
And
now. As a teen, Fish was hooking. He was on the stroll. He would literally stand on corners selling himself for money.
Wait, what year was this again?
This was when he was like a teenager, like 17.
But what year? Like what actual?
I don't know, girl. Math.
What?
He was born. When
was he born?
Oh, he was born in 1870. So
Damn.
this would have been the 1890s.
1890s.
Yeah, he was on the stroll. I mean, but so was Carl Panzram.
Imagine hooking with a horse and carriage.
Well,
that just don't sound appealing.
Wagon. It's just a flat out wagon.
Talk about dragging a wagon.
Mm-hmm. I got a wagon. As a teen, Fish was hooking. So at 17, he became a painter, and he would specifically get jobs in places that would put him closer to children, like YMCAs or homes that had children in them. He would create like little creep nests in the basements and would wear overalls with nothing on underneath so he can easily derobe. So he's like the epitome of creepy janitor dude.
Freaky
or like
farmer.
Yeah. Being a painter also made it easier to not be in the same place for too long. His kit was portable, so he would be able to just pack his shit up and leave whenever things got too weird. It was believed that over a span of 50 years, Fish had raped 100 children. He had been in 23 states from New York to Montana, and he did something with a child in each state. When he made it to his 20s, he headed over to Brussels and visited the brothels there. He was in the brothels. He was in the whorehouses as well, especially the ones that specialized in domination and sadomasochistic acts. He developed an appetite for eating ass and urine. He realized he liked golden showers and to drink pee. He developed new skills overseas that he could ultimately just bring back home and practice on his victims here. Now, he was less concerned about sex and more about the pain that he administered. He would entice them with candies and money. And once he had them, he would bind, rape, and beat them. He even had this thing with flowers where he would insert roses into his penis and then eat the roses.
How does one find out they like that? Like, how do you figure out that that's even what you plan to do, spend your day?
I don't know.
I don't understand people.
I got nothing, because to be totally honest, like, roses are not, like, I know roses are like seductive in like a couple setting where it's like, oh, we put roses on the bed, there's a trail of roses. But rubbing my body with them, or
I like that
putting
rose toner by Fresh.
All right.
But
you wouldn't put it in your pee hole though.
No.
Because it would burn.
No.
Mm-hmm. Mm. But for some reason, yeah, he used to insert roses into his penis. I don't even know. I don't know. I got nothing.
Do you roll them?
I guess you would have to. I mean, you would have to roll them. And then what purpose does that serve? Like, and at first I was like, are we talking about the thorns? Because, you know, he was into inserting pins into his dick hole. We'll get to that. But like roses? I don't know. Or maybe the stem.
That just sounds worse.
I mean, that's literally like inserting a catheter.
Oh, God.
Quote, many of
Gives me a headache.
Many of his victims came from poorer classes. He told the doctor he selected colored children, especially because the authorities didn't pay much attention when they were hurt or missing.
Message.
Racism. Now, because Cupid is evil as fuck, Albert got married. He got married twice.
And his wife never was like, what are you doing in them overalls?
Now, look. Why do you not have on drawers? Like, that's what I need.
Clothes?
Where are your fucking drawers?
Why are you sticking roses up your
Now,
neck?
but here's the thing. He would practice things on his wives because he claimed that he selected them for that purpose, and they were well aware of his perversions. He first got married in his 30s, and his wife was 19, which was arranged by his mother, because I think, too, she was like, yo, my son's a little gay. So he had 6 children: Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry Fish. In 1910, in one source, it wasn't the book, he had his first kill, a kid named Thomas Bedden. That happened in Delaware. There was an incident also called the Kedon episode. This occurred in 1911. Fish was 41 at the time. And at this point, Kedon was 19 years old. He came from the South. This is a black child. Fish got his hands on him and brought him to his room. Now, this boy had the experience with transient hobos, kind of like Carl Panzram, and their sexual activities. Like, so he was like, look, I get it. He just thought that Albert was the same as any transient hobo who liked to have orgies and shit. So Fish said that the boy was covered in lice. So he shaved him all the way down to his pubes. Then, then for 2 to 3 weeks, Albert and Keaton engaged in all sorts of acts. So they had basically had a sex bender for weeks. They would play games, they would role play, and then they would whip each other. He also forced this kid to pee on him. Fish would eat the boy's feces, and he would drink his urine. They were having a jolly old time. One time, shit got too real, though, and Albert decided to cut the boy's buttocks and drink the blood from his butt. Fish tied him up and then stimulated him until he was erect, pulled out a pair of scissors because he was planning on cutting this kid's dick off. Fun. The boy was in so much pain, and Fish could not bear to see the agony in his face, that Fish stopped. He binded his wounds, left him a $10 bill, and bounced.
All that for $10? In 2 weeks? Bitch, that's cheap.
Motherfucker, you've been banging me for 3 weeks. Then again, there have been many times nobody left anything on the counter for me.
Hard truths. Damn.
Yep. Not a goddamn thing.
Same.
May have got me a $16 old fashioned out of it.
I'm in a relationship, and sometimes he just gets up and goes to the gym.
He's like, I'm done.
Like, okay, clean yourself up.
There is nothing more important than throwing in a Stewie quote. Yeah, clean yourself up. Now, he did develop an appetite for dissection of the human penis, and this happened because he went to a wax museum with a male lover.
His appetite. Some people crave crab legs.
Nah, not him. He don't want no seafood boil. He don't want no seafood boil.
hate
He
it
want
here.
pea food.
Yeah.
Zing. Now.
Just made me nauseous.
This episode is going to be stupid. Now, in 1917, he would be left by his wife. The fuck? Why
Do
would
you think he was surprised?
He was like, this bitch.
He's like, what did I do?
Well, he was definitely surprised because he was pissed about it all the way until the end.
Like, how dare this bitch not like me?
So he left. She left him for another man. She never even bothered getting a divorce. She was just like, I'm out. This dude, John Straub, was actually boarding with the Fish family at the time. After that, Fish said he started to have auditory hallucinations. He was starting to hear shit. Quote, nothing that her former husband did would surprise her. This is what the wife said. She was prepared to believe anything about the man. Had Fish ever behaved strangely while they were married? The reporter wanted to know. Mrs. Straub thought for a while before answering. He used to beat himself with a whip.
Oh.
She replied, then refused to say more. He once wrapped himself in a carpet, explaining that he was following the instructions of John the Apostle.
That's literally me trying to put together IKEA furniture.
Okay. Just wrap myself in this carpet.
This is what they told me to do.
Fuck this. It's like all this shit is in Swedish.
I can't read this. I don't have a fucking Phillips or a flathead.
And then it's always something whack. Like you pull it, like the day you do have all your tools, it's like, oh, you just need a hex key. It's like the fuck.
I'm like, fuck, I don't have a hex key.
It's like I bought a whole kit of different size hex. You will not catch me slipping again. I bought a whole kit of hex keys because one time I bought something, I needed a fucking hex key and it was supposed to have a hex key and it didn't. And I was like, never again, my nigga. Like,
fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. You ain't gonna do it again.
You ain't gonna do it again. So a couple sources said that he killed a child in, oh wait, I skipped a part. Hold on. His religious psychosis would only get worse though. So we got the John Apostle bit. From flagellation to inserting penis needles into his body. I said inserting penis as well into his body. Most times he would only insert them part way, but on at least 20 occasions, Fish inserted the needle so deep that he couldn't get them out. He would later get x-rayed, and the doctor who examined his x-rays stated that Fish had, quote, in the groin, close to the back wall of the rectum, slightly above the transverse section of the colon, near the bladder, clustered around the tip of the spine, and judging by their eroded condition, some of the needles had been in Fish's body for a quite number of years. Others had apparently been inserted through the perineum as recently as 6 months before. Many times Fish had tried to insert them into his testicles, but the pain was so unbearable, even for him, that he just stopped trying. He was like, fuck it.
Do the needles not rust?
They do. That's why they were able to tell how long they've been in there, because they were eroded.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah. So a couple sources says
distracted.
Yeah, probably. A couple sources says that he killed a child in 1919. He stabbed a disabled child in Georgetown. He was known for looking for poor and mentally disabled kids as well, because he figured no one really would fucking care. There have been many instances where he used other children to help him get children as well, very similar to Carl Panzram. His Yeg, he was a Yeg, where he was like an older man criminal that was like, you know, he would have like a kid that he kept that would be like a fucking travel companion. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of that movie Changeling with Angelina Jolie.
I never saw Changeling.
Bitch, you better pull Changeling out.
Where the fuck am I gonna get a DVD player?
Oh, you ain't got no DVD player?
No.
Y'all slipping.
What?
So, no, but Changeling is the shit though. That's a great movie. And there's Angelina Jolie plays a mom who finds out that her son has gone missing. And then the LA police department, because they're so fucking desperate to like not lose and not have any more shitty press, they just bring a kid to her house and was like, here's your son. And she was like, nah, this is not my son. They were like, you're crazy. Put her in the mental institution. And so they put her in, it's based on a true story. So they put her in a mental institution. Turns out she wasn't crazy. It wasn't
because she
her
would know
son.
what her son looks like. I'm sure.
Definitely. But it's like this is one of those Clint Eastwood movies where like the beginning of the movie is way different than the ending, because at first you think it's like, oh, she's looking for a missing child, her child's missing, but then it ends up being about a serial killer, because it's based on the chicken coop murders, where this like freaky dude was like leaving all these kids in chicken coops and shit. And there's this kid that's brought to the precinct, and he's basically one of those kids who was traveling with the dude that kidnapped her son. He's like an older kid, and he would use the kid to lure kids, because kids, if they see another kid, they think it's safe.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's same thing with Alton Coleman. Kids felt a little more safe when they saw a woman. So if it's a woman or a kid, I had another case that I did, Colleen Stan. She got into a car of a person who she was hitchhiking, and she felt safe because he had a wife with a baby in the front seat. She didn't know that he was going to kidnap her anyway. Jesus. Anyway, so yeah, people are sick.
People are very sick.
So he would basically travel around with the kid. And in 1924, he tried to kidnap this little girl named Beatrice Keel. He was trying to lure her off.
Kiddo?
I know, right? Trying to lure her off in the woods to find rhubarb, but her mother caught him and ran him off her farm. Fish would later return and be caught asleep in their barn by her father. Ugh. 3 days later, Fish killed a child, Francis McDonald, who was 8.
I'll be so pissed. Somebody sleeping in my fucking barn. And you're trying to like...
But first of all, I'll be even more pissed by the fact that, bitch, I just ran you off my farm and you had the unmitigated gall to come back and then take a nap in my shit.
Like you fell asleep being a creep?
Yeah.
How dare you sleep?
And that's probably because he was lurking, waiting for the kid to come into the barn or some weird shit.
I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted from stalking. What the fuck?
All that stalking today just wore me out.
Nerve.
So on July 14th, Oh, you need some more liquor. So on July 14th, Fish was lurking. His hands this is a quote, his hands made a constant nervous motion, clenching and unclenching. He seemed to be mumbling to himself, and he passed down the street. The 2 German shepherds belonging to McDonald's next door neighbor set up, and the German shepherd, motherfucker, started howling at this motherfucker. They're like, who is he? The gray-haired man turned to the woman on the porch, tipped his hat, and vanished down the road. Francis was playing outside with his friends when Fish approached, looking exactly 299 years old. Because Fish looks old as fuck.
Yeah, because he's sitting around slipping needles in
and
his
eating
dick.
Shit.
That's gotta age.
I don't think eating boo-boo is going to be anti-aging.
But you would think that all of the roses would do something.
Not if you're also drinking piss and eating boo-boo.
This is true.
Yeah.
You think it has gluten?
It definitely has from somebody else's digestive tract.
Like, is there a little bit of bloat there?
So he beckons the boys to come to him. Francis went over to see what he wanted. Of course, older gentleman, maybe he needs help. His friends turned their back for a quick second, and when they turned back around, Francis was gone. A neighbor spotted Francis walking into the woods with the old man walking behind him. Now, the thing that Fish didn't know was that Francis was the son of a Staten Island police officer. And,
you should do research before you.
Yeah, you should probably do some reconnaissance just to make sure
this is the
you're gonna
second
make a quick getaway. But that's because he's impulsive. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's really because he's impulsive. So he didn't know he was a police officer. And the next several days would be an all-out hands-on-deck effort to find the person who took little Francis. Quote, the autopsy report on the victim revealed that that there was a presence of undigested raisins in his stomach, the bait, they're assuming, the coroner theorized, which had been used to lure the boy into the woods. Because of the condition of the corpse, the medical examiner also speculated that the murderer couldn't have been as old as Mrs. McDonald thought, because she's like, there's no way anybody could deliver such a ferocious beating and be old. They thought that the beating was so bad that there possibly was more than one person. Fucked up. The death of Francis was overshadowed by Leopold and Loeb, though. Do you know who they are?
No.
So, Leopold and Loeb, this is just a quick synopsis according to Wiki. This is actually a Chicago crime. They were two wealthy students at the University of Chicago who kidnapped and murdered a 14-year-old boy by the name of Bobby Franks in Chicago, obviously, in May 1924. They committed the murder, which at the time was characterized as the crime of the century, because they were hoping to demonstrate superior intellect. We're smart. We'll be able to get away from this, which they believed enabled them and entitled them to carry on the perfect crime without consequences. Orson Welles, come back up, full circle. Orson Welles did a movie called Compulsion. Dean Stockwell, the actor from fucking Quantum Leap, which you probably never seen, but Langoliers.
Oh yeah, which one is he on? The
writer, the one that knew everything, the cutie pop.
Oh, him.
The one that was like, you know, he knew everything that was going on because he was a science fiction writer.
Unsolved Mysteries.
Basically. So that was Dean Stockwell. He was young though in this movie. He plays, I can't remember if he plays Leopold or Loeb, but he plays one of the two guys. And then there was another movie later, I think with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Gosling, called The Perfect Murder. That was a new age reimagining of Leopold and Loeb, where you got these like these entitled white boys who are like, we could commit a murder and get away with it, sure. Like they just thought that they were too smart. Like, of course we can get away with it. So Compulsion, Orson was fat at this point. He plays their lawyer.
Nice.
He plays their attorney. Orson does. It's such a good movie. Such a good movie. I may own it actually, but you can't watch it because you don't got a DVD player.
Oh yes, let's just keep rubbing it in.
Okay. But anyway, great film. If you have not seen Compulsion, I'm sure you haven't. You should see it. It's a great movie. It's acted ridiculously because Leopold and Loeb case overshadowed the news cycle forever. Like motherfuckers were like, yo, is there anything else to talk about? That's all they were talking about. So because of that, they couldn't figure out who did this because they couldn't get the media's attention enough to get, you know what I mean, to make people want to know who did it. So when Francis failed to come home, they went on a search, and it would be, unfortunately, 3 Boy Scouts who found the body.
Yikes.
Quote, it had been hastily concealed under a pile of branches and leaves. The clothes below Francis's waist, stockings and shoes, underpants, khaki, knickerbockers, had been violently ripped from his body. He had been, as the newspapers would put it, atrociously assaulted, then strangled with his suspenders, which were twisted tightly around his neck, and they seemed embedded into the flesh. That's how tight they were.
Suspenders are made of elastic,
yeah.
BT-dub.
Yeah. Before killing McDonald, Fish tried to lure Benjamin Eisman to an old shack in Staten Island when the little boy ran into an old black man who told him, listen, son, you better get out of here. That man is something else. A lot of kids have gone in there and they did never come out.
It's like, thanks, Danny Glover.
Straight up. Like Black Savior, 100%.
Thanks for the warning.
Like Benjamin Eisman shouldn't have been fucking racist ever again after that. Eisman took off and then got a ferry back. He basically convinced the ferry conductor. He was like, yo, like I wasn't even supposed to be over here. This creepy man brought me. I need to go back home. And so he finessed his way back on the ferry and he got home. It was the murder it was the murder of Francis that led to the nickname the Gray Man. They started calling him the Gray Man.
He just can't get away from the terrible nickname.
No.
That's his fault.
It is. Fish confessed that he had lured the little boy into the woods, strangled him with the child's own suspenders, and was about to dismember the body when he thought he heard someone approaching and fled. It was actually in his 50s when his mind took a real turn. He needed to castrate and kill a young boy to atone for his actions. Now, as a young man, Fish had hoped to become a minister.
Yeah.
This is where we get all the flagellation. He believed he was receiving divine commands to torment and kill, and he would make up a biblical quote. Like he would say shit like, blessed is the man who correcteth his son, in whom he delighteth with stripes, for great shall be his reward.
Corinthians 13:12.
Exactly.
Shut the hell up.
Or happy is he that taketh thy little ones and dasheth their heads against the stone. Nigga, what is that? Ham and eggs?
Meanwhile, he read that out of a fortune cookie.
Exactly. exactly. That's like ham and eggs, chapter 1, verse nothing, bitch.
It's not real, asshole.
He had once found a 14-year-old boy and had planned to bind, castrate, and whip him until he was unconscious, and then he was going to leave him to bleed to get death. But he didn't get a chance because their car drove by, so he gave up.
Oh, phooey.
Yeah. He also apparently had a thing for putting things in his butt and setting them on fucking fire. Now,
how do people like him continue to live? Like, how did he live this long doing all of this dangerous shit to himself? Like, clearly he didn't truly want to be alive.
Yeah, and
otherwise,
meanwhile, your
trying
parents
to
find out that you did a
stick needles in your
you did like a fucking ecstasy pill, and they think that you're gonna die tomorrow. Versus like this dude who was like putting all this wild shit in his body and was
he's,
like he
like,
lived until he was like 65. They had to kill him. Actually, he didn't even just live.
Yeah, he didn't even just die of like natural causes, like from eating other.
I mean, he was also rotting from the inside. Like his body was beat the fuck. I already know that I didn't do this, and I wish that I did. But there was a point in the book where they talked about like every ailment that he ultimately would have been afflicted by. Like his lungs were, you know what I mean? Like his liver was shit. His kidneys were this, you know what I mean? And I cannot believe I didn't put it in the synopsis, but it's stupid how unhealthy he actually was.
It's also a given because people thought he was older than what he was. He was only 50.
Yeah, he was only 50. He looked 80. So the thing about the fire butt, the connection to this trauma could be because he was in school this one time and the kids set the tail of a horse on fire and watched him run around in agony.
Kids are bad too.
He would also hit himself with a paddle covered in nails. And he also had this weird thing for like burning houses, like smelling burnt houses. He liked the sounds and smell of burning houses, which is, arsonist shit.
Because I think people like the fire, the wood wick.
Yeah, that's facts.
I think everybody does.
Yeah, but
they're like, it's soothing.
But I also think it just feeds into like that whole psychopath thing where motherfuckers be like into setting shit on fire and shit, and they just like the idea of, let's smell. But then I also equate it to like some motherfuckers like the smell of gasoline. I like the smell of gasoline.
It is I am the motherfucker. I also like the smell of cigarette smoke.
That's interesting.
I've always liked the smell of cigarette smoke.
I hate it.
But remember, did you know that Granny was like, you like the smell of cigarette smoke too much, you're gonna grow up to be a smoker? She told me that as a kid.
Wow.
I was like, yikes.
Damn.
And here I am, me and my pink vape.
A smoker.
Well,
kind of.
I can turn it off.
Now, here are all of his many perversions: sadism, masochism, active and passive flagellation, which is somebody beating him or him beating himself, castration and self-castration, him castrating or him castrating himself, exhibitionism, just walking the fuck around naked, voyeur acts, which is watching people, picure acts, which are jabbing sharp implements into oneself or others for sexual gratification. Pedophilia, obviously we know what that is. Homosexuality is not a perversion, but they thought it was. Fellatio, also not a perversion. Sucking dick is not a perversion. Cunnilingus, eating coochie, not a perversion. Analingus, eating ass, not a perversion. 4 of these things aren't perversions, but he got 13 other ones, so I'll keep going. Coprophagia is eating boo-boo. Undonism is a sexual preoccupation with urine in all its form. Fetishism, which is also really not a perversion, but whatever. Cannibalism, which we know eating people is pretty much a perversion. And hypereroticism, which I'm experiencing right now. No, I'm just joking. But it is not a perversion. It is a sexual intensity that you just cannot.
You just advertise
an
yourself
itch
on this podcast.
You fucking can't scratch.
Jesus. Horse.
Now, because he flubbed the other boy's murder, he needed another male. So on May 25th, 1928, Fish saw a classified advertisement in the Sunday edition of the New York World for a young man, 18, who was looking for work in the country. Fish was at the apartment of Delia and Frank Budd 3 days later, inquiring about the ad. Quote, "I am looking for a young fellow named Edward Budd. I read his ad in yesterday's paper." Now, they assumed this man was on the level. I mean, he looked like he had more than they did. But when Delia offered him a seat inside, she realized that his clothes were tattered. He wasn't all that put together as she felt like he was when she saw him at the door. His name was Frank Howard. This time, that's what his name was. Because, you know, he's another one. He had a bunch of pseudonyms. And he was looking for a strong farmhand to handle the farm because his wife had abandoned him, leaving him with the kids. Life was hard for the former interior designer. When he's really just a painter. Howard is like,
he be trying to stick people.
Nigga, you
like,
are not.
How will I go on?
You are not an interior
You're
designer.
not an interior designer.
Howard was looking to replace his current helper, and he noticed the ad. So he saw Edward and even said that he'd take the boy's friend, William Corman, as well. Quote, I must be on my way. I have a business engagement in New Jersey.
He has no job.
He'd return to them in the next few days. And on June 2nd, Frank Howard sent a telegram saying, been over in Jersey, call you in the morning. Now, this was a stall because Albert didn't think the two boys would work. They looked much bigger. He felt like it was worth dealing with. But he figured, whatever, they would have to do. In the meantime, he gathered his implements of hell, which consisted of a knife, a small handsaw, and a meat cleaver. And all of that shit cost him less than $5. Which goes back to like what we've talked about with weapons in general. Like Chris Rocky said this, like, don't fuck it. You can't do gun control. Make bullets expensive. It's like, this motherfucker's too expensive. These shits are too cheap. You making this shit too accessible. Like, make shit expensive. So of course he takes them home, neatly lines them under his bed because he needs to get ready for tomorrow. Before he gets to the buds, there was this other boy named Cyril Quinn. He was courted by Albert for a while. He was kind of putting in work with Cyril. He was like trying to get him candy and money and shit. But when he invited Cyril to his house to offer him some sandwiches, he invited these other boys with them, and they were playing in his room, and they saw the implements of hell under his bed that he had just like neatly lined up and uncovered.
Duh.
So the kids booked it. They're like, we need to get the fuck out of here. This is stupid. So on June 3rd, he headed to the Buds to retrieve the boys. When he arrived, he noticed their daughter, Grace Budd, 10 years old.
Oh, Grace.
And asked the Buds if he could take her to his niece's birthday party and he would come back for the boys. Quote, Edward, I'm not going to take you on the job right at the present. I received a letter from my sister yesterday, and she is throwing a birthday party for one of her children, which I'm obliged to attend. Here's $2. You and Willie and some of the boys go take in a moving picture. Later on this evening, after the party, I will pick you up on my way home. Now, this is what also pisses me off. What was wild about this interaction when you read about it is the fact that he set... First of all, Edward and William were not home when Albert got there. So he sat with the mom and the dad and talked to them for a period. Mind you, at no point did he tell the parents that he was changing plans and he was going to pick them up later in the evening. At no point did he mention that his niece's birthday party. At no point did he mention anything like that. He didn't mention it until he saw Grace. That would have been a red flag for me.
Well, I think back then they were just so naive.
Sure.
Like, because in my mind, all of the shit sounds fishy. Because why are
no
you
pun intended.
Why are you letting this stranger that looks like he's 250 years old and probably has terrible breath?
Oh God, they say his teeth was raggedy as fuck.
I would let him go anywhere with my children.
No. Mm-mm.
Like I wouldn't let him touch my pets.
Mm-mm.
I wouldn't let him in my home.
Well, first of all, because you peeped game earlier, you saw that, you thought, he got his shit together. But then when you saw his actual clothes, you're like, no, he's a bum.
He's only wearing overalls.
Well, no, he was in a suit. At this point, yeah, fuck that. He was like fully dressed in like regular 19-teens. Yeah, exactly. 1920s garb. But he was like dusty as fuck. And two, that's one of the reasons why they called him a gray man is because he was old, but like even the clothes that he wore looked dusty.
And no one thought any of this was strange.
Exactly. Well, and two, because everybody's so fucking poor.
I'm like, was
like,
everybody just dusty back then?
Yeah, they were. They were dusty as fuck. Everybody was dirty.
They judge now and everyone's poor now.
Facts. So the Buds were worried that if they didn't let him take her it would be like they were suggesting that he couldn't be trusted. And the last thing they wanted was for Edward to lose the opportunity, so they let him take her. He gave them a fake address that they didn't know was fake. Quote, at the corner of 14th Street and 9th Avenue, he retrieved his canvas wrap bundle and thanked...
fake.
Exactly. Well, no, that's real because that's where he's going to pick up his canvas wrap.
Oh, that's
bundle.
The real address. I thought that was the fake address. I'm like, that sounds fake.
It sounds fake to us because New York addresses sound fake as fuck.
They all sound fake.
14th Street and 9th?
How are you two numbers?
Why would you even confuse anybody like that?
Why are there two numbers?
Streets and avenues. Like in Chicago, it's like Roosevelt and State, 13th and Merrill. Well, 13th and Merrill isn't a thing. But you see what I mean? You got the number, then you got a name. Like we're not throwing in, unless you're in an area. Yeah, like unless you're in an area that has like an avenue number, which, you know, what's that, Blue Island or some shit that has like 9th Avenue? I don't know, whatever. So anyway. So he retrieved his canvas wrapped bundle, which are his implements of hell that he left at a newsstand before he even went to the buds. So premeditation. He left his canvas wrapped bundle, thanked the man inside the newsstand for watching it, and then he and the girl continued on their way, the old man cradling his bundle in his arms. Gracie was never seen by her family again.
That's their fault.
Straight up.
Because there were literally 15 red flags.
Yeah.
And y'all ignored it.
Period.
Every single one of them.
Everyone. The news broke 2 days later, and there was a manhunt underway. They would even arrest someone. The police arrested Charles Edward Pope on September 5th, 1930, as a suspect of the kidnapping. He was 66 years old. He was an apartment house superintendent, and he was accused by his estranged wife. He spent 108 days in jail because of this, and between his arrest and trial, his trial was December 22nd, 1930, and thankfully, he would eventually be found not guilty because his wife was just a bitch. She didn't want to deal with him no more, so she decided that she was just going to be like, well, I'd rather you be accused of murder.
Please take him.
He's a piece of shit. So now, during this grueling manhunt, the parents had to deal with crank letters, false leads, and over-sensationalized media coverage of the murder. Mind you, Delia Budd wasn't helping either because she kept wrongfully identifying fucking everyone. To her, everybody kidnapped her child. I also believe that at some point, Delia Budd started to lose her mind. Now,
well, because she knew it was her fault.
I think there was guilt there, and the father too. Mm-hmm. You know, because he was there as well. I think there was guilt there. You know, you handed your child over to a predator. Mm-hmm. This now, because she kept identifying everyone, this slowed down the investigation and it rendered her completely non-credible as a witness because they were like, bitch,
everybody ain't do it.
So eventually they would assign to the case William King. He was tenacious as fuck. He spent years looking for Grace's killers. Well, and we'll get back to him because he was busy. But in the meantime, Albert would get married again in the early 1930s. But he only stuck around for 2 months.
I can't figure out why people would want to marry him. It doesn't sound like there's anything attractive. The motherfucker ain't got no money. Like, what are we there for?
Exactly.
What is the reason?
And so... Okay, so Estelle, his wife's name was Estelle Wilcox. They lived together for like 1 week. They were married through a marriage agency, but then Fish started writing classified articles for young girls to come work for him, even though he didn't have any work. Quote, I think he was crazy. This is what she said.
Okay.
She said Fish had disappeared after a few weeks, Estelle explained, and she never heard from him again, nor has she made the slightest effort to locate him. Quote, I was glad he was gone. She said through her tears, I don't care what happens.
Why are you crying?
She probably crying because she realized she dodged a fucking bullet. Fish had been arrested, dated back all the way to 1903, though, for 3 larceny charges over 6 weeks. But letters were really his thing. He loved writing these obscene letters to strangers. And Fish was arrested in 1930 for sending an obscene letter to a woman who answered an advertisement for a maid. This was the letter. Now, in this letter, he presents himself as a successful Hollywood producer.
Not that either.
He is ready to offer large sums of money.
Don't have any.
as well as his undying affection to
Not
women,
favorable.
to women willing to perform certain services, either for himself or at times for his fictitious teenage son that he calls Bobby.
Okay, he's not real.
The letters were a delirium of violent sadomasochistic fantasies involving some, but by no means all, of Fish's favorite activities: bondage, flagellation, and coprophagy. I can never say this name right, but it's when you eat shit. He said, quote, "I wish you could see me now.
I'm sure she doesn't.
I'm sitting in a chair naked.
Ew.
The pain is across my back, just over my head." I can't even get this out.
Be fucking for real. Like, he can't be serious.
I'm sorry, and I said that wrong. The pain is over my back, just over my behind. When you strip me naked, you will see the most perfect form. Damn, confident. Yours, sweet honey of my heart. I can taste your sweet piss, your sweet shit. You must pee in a glass, and I shall drink every drop as if as you watch me. That's not a typo. This nigga's illiterate. Tell me when you want to do number 2, which I didn't even know that was a thing back then. I will take you over my knees, pull up your clothes, take down your drawers, and hold my mouth to your sweet honey fat ass and eat your sweet peanut butter as it comes out fresh and hot.
Okay, he's too much.
That is how they do it in Hollywood. Is it? Because we work in Hollywood.
I have never, okay? Like, I done some shit, all right? And I have never. Like, I've worked for FX.
What?
And FX gets low, okay? And they ain't never gone now. So I would, like, I'm confused.
Okay, so.
I think it's fake.
But there's more. To another woman, he explained that his only son, Bobby, who had been crippled at 9 by an attack of infantile paralysis.
And please, remind me, Bobby's not real.
He don't exist.
Copy.
Required frequent spankings with a cat of 9 tails. You know what that is? It's one of them whips that are like split into, with fringe for his own good. Bobby does not wet or muss his pants or his bed. He will tell you when he has to use the toilet.
Oh,
number
what
1.
advertising?
Or number 2. For number 1, his pants must be unbuttoned at the crotch and his monkey taken out. His pants and drawers are all made up with a drop seat, with the buttons in the back. I got pajamas like that. All you have to do is loosen 3 buttons in the back and down they come. Saves a lot of undressing. Handy when you want to spank him. Just drop the seat of his pants and drawers. You don't have to strip him except at night for bed or to give him a bath or switching. The doctors say 3 or 4 good spankings a day on his bare behind will do him good, as he is nice and fat in that spot. It will be an aid to him when he don't mind you. Then you must strip him and use the cat of 9 tails. Say you won't hesitate to use the paddle or cat of 9 tails on him when he needs it. This is just like a fucking fantasy letter, because Bobby don't exist.
Real. I'm like, Bobby's not real. Meanwhile, he's writing one of those J.C. Penney catalog descriptions.
What? You need to get closer. So he signed using a pseudonym. He had several, as we know. When he was finally nabbed, they analyzed him and figured he was nuts, and they sent him to Bellevue. They were like, nigga, you need to go.
Really?
Quote, last year about June, this is after he was apprehended. And they started asking him about the letters. Last year about June, how did you come to write these letters? Fish explained that during the summer of 1929, he had been working as a handyman and a painter at a Harlem sanitarium run by one Dr. Robert B. Lamb. One day, according to Fish, Dr. Lamb's chauffeur discovered a cache of dirty letters in the sanitarium garage, and that night read them aloud to a group of men. Fish was among them, who had gathered for their evening card game in the chauffeur's room. Hearing them had put the idea in Fish's head. Before that, says Dr. LaGuardia, you never had any desire for anything of the sort. Question. That was a question. Fish shook his head emphatically. No, sir, not at all. Bullshit. When you wrote those obscene letters, how did you feel? I had no particular feeling. Did you feel like that you had to like write these letters? It was just sort of a habit. LaGuardia went on to question Fish about his marital status, his previous troubles with the law, and his memory, asking him at one point to count backwards from 100 by deducting 7 at each time. I was like, that takes work.
I don't think I could do that.
Fish rattled off the sequence without a mistake. LaGuardia made more notes. There were just a few more questions he wanted to ask. When was the last time you had intercourse? Fish seemed to ponder. 2 years ago. Have you had any desires since then? No. Bullshit. Have you been a steady church goer? Fish smiled, his front teeth protruding slightly through his tightly drawn lips. For the time during the interview, he looked directly at the questioner. Yes, sir. Episcopal church. How can you reconcile the things you do with the church? His smile evaporated. There is no comparison. During Fish's observation period in Bellevue, the inmate had been quiet and cooperative and had conducted himself in an orderly and normal manner. There had been no evidence of delusional notions or hallucinatory experiences.
Oh, because he's not crawling up the walls. He must be okay.
Is it true that he shows evidence of early senile changes? This condition, however, is quite slight at the present time and has not impaired his mentality. His memory, particularly of a man of his years, is excellent. The old man was certainly suffering from some sort of sexual psychopathy. The contents of the letters Fish had mailed to Mrs. Solarid, who was the woman he was emailing about the maid job, and others offered sufficient...
You said email.
Damn, mailed. Offer sufficient evidence of such conduct. Frequently is the result of senile dementia and is observed in men of advanced years, which is like, he's not that old.
He's not.
But in this particular case, we believe it has not the same significance for the reason that this man, according to his history as well as our examination, has manifested sex perversions from early life. In short, the doctor wrote, though Fish might be a sexual pervert, he showed no signs of mental deterioration or dementia. As a result of our psychiatric examination, he concluded, we are of the opinion that this man at the present time is not insane. Now, when taken in, he had just turned 60, but they thought he was much, much older. He stayed there for 30 days and then he was discharged in the custody of his daughter. Now, the authorities got wind that there was an old codger who had, looked a lot like that dude Pope that they arrested under 10-day observation at Bellevue for sending letters of a, quote, non-mailable matter. But his name was Albert Fish. So now, during the Depression, kidnapping for ransom was incredibly common. In 1932 alone, there had been 282 reported kidnappings in 28 states. All but 65 of the perpetrators had gotten away. So, of course, the Missing Persons Bureau is like, yo, we are mad busy. Like, there was also that really famous kidnapping, the Lindbergh baby. That happened. And that dominated the news cycle. So by 1932, Grace Budd had been missing for 4 years.
And her family just done failed her.
Look, mind you, Albert's children had a somewhat loving relationship with Albert. Even later, we find out that his children were actually ordered to beat him a lot and knew a little too much about his sexual perversions. In the early years, they had caught Albert doing all types of wild shit. One time, Albert Jr. caught Fish masturbating and flagellating himself. Another instance, quote, he caught his father standing in an apple orchard on the little hill behind the bungalow. The old man had his right hand raised high in the air and was shouting something over and over. Albert strained to listen, and the old man was screaming that he was Christ.
Okay. No one thought to check with his family before everyone deemed him sane.
Clearly. Albert would be picked up again for the letters. While searching his room, they found, quote, a homemade cat o' nine tails tucked inside a dresser drawer, a frankfurter, which is basically a fucking hot dog, and a carrot. Both fetid with decay
Ew.
and with something worse. And what the hell did the old man use the carrot and this damn thing for? This is what they demanded to know, because the feculence of the two objects made the answer real clear. The old man's sneering reply confirmed what Smith already knew. Albert Fish said, "I stick 'em up my ass."
You can't just get a new one?
I mean, they're carrots. You can get them anywhere.
Why must we use
Hold on to the same one.
Ugh.
Fish was, I mean, these are like organic dildos. But dildos need to be washed.
Yeah, I was like, but they can't just be put under the bed and
just,
fucking
hold on to
in
them.
a canvas bag.
This man is the dirty old bitch is the
He
problem.
really is a dirty old bitch.
Fish was let out again in 1931. His son noticed in 1934 that his father was getting worse. His father started craving raw meat when the moon was full. There was also this nail-studded paddle that he kept finding all over the house. And then there was this weird thing with the needles. He also noticed that his father would have these terrible fucking nightmares. He would wake in a puddle of sweat, hearing his heart was racing, God's own words ringing in his ears, demanding atonement, mortification of the flesh. He would leap from his sodden bedclothes, stripped to his skin, fetch his needles and thimble. Lodged inside the old man's lower body were 27 needles. On several occasions, he made his son drive him back to the cottage where he killed Grace Budd. But the last time, remorse had overwhelmed him at the first glimpse of the place, and he was unable to get out the car. He was beginning to doubt that he was able to take his secret to the grave. He was like, I don't think I can hold on to this. This is too much. It was at that time he felt like he needed to atone. And the best thing to do was to let Mrs. Budd know what he did to her daughter.
I think you should just hold on to that. I don't think you should tell anybody now. It's what you gonna tell her for? What would we tell her for? Tell the police.
So the search continues. King, who is the investigator at this point, he traveled over 50,000 miles searching for leads. He would plant phony news about the Budd case so people wouldn't forget. One outlet he used was the gossip column on Broadway. That was actually a William Randolph Hearst paper, which is who Citizen Kane is based on.
60
Charles Foster Kane is based on William Randolph Hearst. Now, here was the news flash. I checked on Grace Budd's mystery. She was 8 when she was kidnapped about 6 years ago, which I read 10, but okay. And it is safe to tell you that the Department of Missing Persons will break the case, or they expect to in 4 weeks. They are holding Cokie now. I don't know who Cokie is supposed to be. Now at the Randall's Island, who is said to know most about the crime. Grace is supposed to have been done away with in Lyme, but another legend is that her skeleton is buried in a local spot. More a nod. Now, this wasn't true. Though what they were posting in this paper was just to keep her news circulating because she was being drowned out by so much other news. He just found a paper and he found a journalist and he kept being like, put this in, put this in, put this in, because he didn't want her murder to lose news cycle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but it turns out this was kind of prophetic. Because 10 days later, the Budds received a letter from Albert Fish. Delia couldn't read because she didn't know how to read. So Edward read it. And Edward read that shit and was like, I got to go to the police station.
He's like, I'll be back.
He was like, I'm not even going to read this to you. You don't even need to know. This is what the letter said. Brace yourself. I'm a sip.
Oh, God.
Okay. My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold to the butchers to be cut up and sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go into any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stewed meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it.
What?
A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night, he spanked them, tortured them to make the meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass, boiled, broiled, fried, stewed. The little boy was next and went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street near Right Side. He told me so often how good human flesh was. I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. Brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How did she kick, bite, and scratch? I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook it, and eat it. Oh. How sweet and tender her little ass was, roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though, and I could have if I wished. She died a virgin. Finally, King was getting somewhere. Now, the letter itself didn't nab fish. It was the envelope. King was able to see the street address. The initials were NYPCBA on the envelope, which was the stationary envelope for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. The president of the association was asked about the envelope, and he confirmed that it was his organization's stationery, and there was no man named Frank Howard in their records. The president had an emergency association meeting to see who stole the stationery, and they found Lee Sikowski, a janitor and errand boy. He confessed that he stole a few sheets and some envelopes. He just took them. He was living in a rooming house on 52nd Street. He had just left them on a shelf in the room before he moved to Lexington Avenue. King went to the house and compared the register to the Bud letter, and the name Albert H. Fish matched. So King was able to catch up with Fish because he returned to the rooming house to collect a check. His son, who was working for the Civilian Conservation Corps, would send checks to his father every time he was paid. So the owner of the boarding house contacted the officer and told him, yo, Fish is here. And so on December 13th, 1934, King arrived. Fish tried to threaten him with a razor blade, which King just knocked that shit right out of his hand. He was like,
he's
nigga,
fucking
are
90,000
you joking right
years
now?
old at this point.
He wasn't completely sure it was him, though, at this point, but he was pretty fucking positive. Quote, at daybreak, now this happened after he was arrested. At daybreak, the younger Albert, who was living in Astoria, Queens, was awakened by a bunch of reporters who informed him of his father's arrest. The son's response was striking. The old skunk. I knew something like this would happen sooner or later. When the reporters pressed him to elaborate, he explained that during the months he and his father had lived together, the old man had shown signs of extremely disturbing behavior. Often he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming terribly. At other times, he would take off his clothes and whip himself. Once the younger Fish went on, a woman said he had taken her little girl into an empty apartment and removed his clothes. Albert Jr. made a disgusted gesture with his hand. I want nothing to do with him, and I won't do anything to help him. That's what his son said. While the reporter scribbled frantically, the younger Fish thought for a moment, then asked, "Hey, say what was the name of the girl he murdered?" Several voices answered at the same time. "Bud, Grace Bud." Albert Fish Jr. gaped. My God, that's the name he used to scream out in his sleep.
Oh. So he did feel bad about killing her then.
Fish was 5.5 feet tall. He was 130 pounds. Fish admitted he sent the Bud letter, but denied knowing anything about Grace Bud's disappearance. He also admitted to trying to kill Cyril Quinn. Now, quote, "All right," King said quietly, "I'll tell you what. I'm going to send for the manager of the Western Union office at 104th Street and 3rd Avenue, where this telegraph was sent from. Then I'm going to get hold of a member of the Costa family who owned 409 East 100th Street, where you lived there when you lived there in 1928. Then I'm going to send for Reuben Rossoff, the pushcart peddler you bought the little pail from for the cheese, the pot cheese that he brought to the Buds." He said, when you visit the Buds on June 3rd, then I'm going to bring down the whole Bud family and William Corman. And I have the feeling that these people will be able to identify you. Fish goes, "Don't send for those people. I'll tell you all about it. I'm the man you want. I took Grace Bud from her home on June 3rd, and I brought her to Westchester and killed her that same afternoon." Carrying her bouquet of roses, Grace walked up the porch steps and into the house. "Up here," Fish called out when he heard her enter. She began to climb the stairs. As soon as she reached the second floor landing, Fish stepped out into the hallway. At the sight of the naked old man, the little girl began to scream. "I'll tell my mama," she yelled. Dropping her flowers, she turned and tried to run downstairs. With surprising speed, Fish grabbed Grace by the throat and pulled her into the empty bedroom.
Jesus.
The little girl began to struggle wildly, kicking and scratching with her own surprising strength. Fish dug his fingertips deep into her throat. He dragged her over the canvas tarp, wrestled her to the floor, knelt on her chest with his full weight while he continued to choke her. By then, he had become erect. When he was sure she was dead, he lifted her head and rested it on the rim of a 5-gallon paint can. He then reached over for his double-edged knife and cut off Grace's head.
Jesus, he's sick.
Taking care to catch as much blood as possible inside the empty can. Fish said he undressed the headless corpse, tossed the splattered clothing into an empty walk-in closet a few feet away. Getting stiffly to his feet, he shoved open the window, picked up the paint bucket, dumped the blood out into the yard. Returning to the body, Fish knelt beside it. Using the knife again, he began to slice through her midsection, just below the navel. When he reached the spine, he switched to his cleaver. Before very long, the body lay chopped in two, carrying Grace's white shoes in one hand and her head in the other. Fish went downstairs, out the side door, and up the hill to the wooden outhouse. He thought about disposing the head down the toilet hole, but the idea of dropping it into the muss, which he shit basically, seemed wrong to him. That's what seemed wrong.
Oh, nothing before this was wrong.
So he set it in the corner. He covered it with some old newspapers that were lying on the floor. He did, however, stick the shoes in the hole, placing them on a small rock ledge just below the opening. Back inside the house, he picked up the upper and lower halves of Grace's body. He propped them in a corner of the room beside the closet. Then he swung open the closet door so that the body was hidden from view. By the time he was finished, his hands were coated with blood. There was no water in the house, so he walked back outside and he spent some time scrubbing himself clean with fistfuls of grass. Then he returned to the second-story bedroom and got dressed. He carefully rewrapped his tools in the canvas tarp and placed the bundle behind the closet door next to the dismembered corpse. It was 4:10 p.m. when he left the house and headed back to Mountain Road toward the railroad station, just slightly more than an hour since he and Grace Budd had arrived at Wisteria Cottage. Under his arm, Fish carried a small newspaper-wrapped bundle, but this was the detail he neglected to mention to Detective King. King paused to refill his fountain pen. Then he flipped to a fresh page of his notebook. What time was it when you arrived at your home? About 6:30. I returned about 4 days later. I took the body and the legs from behind the door. The legs were so stiff, Rigger, that they were stiff as a board. I threw them out the window onto the lawn and carried the torso out, picking up the legs as I passed over the lawn. I went to the stone wall in the back of the house. I laid the body and the legs as they would be in life behind the stone wall. I then went to the outhouse and got the head. It was all stiff. The hair was all clotted. I brought the head up and placed the head with the body just as it had been in life. The head, the torso, and the legs. Did you bury it? Asked King. No, I left it on top of the ground. Then I went back into the house, took the tools, threw them over the wall. Have you ever been there? Have you been there since, is what he asked. Yeah, I have been up there 4 or 5 times with my son. Have you seen the body? Fish shook his head. No, I didn't go see the body. By now, it's nearly 2:45 in the afternoon. King had been questioning Fish for nearly an hour. There was only one more question he wanted to ask. What had made the man do it? Fish scratched one end of his mustache and looked thoughtfully. You know, he replied for a moment, I never could account for it. Fish told Wortham later that after decapitating Grace Budd, he had tried drinking her blood from the 5-gallon paint can, and he, shoved, the 5-gallon paint can that, basically he had cut her head on.
I thought he threw all of it out the window.
He said before he threw it out that he tried drinking it. The warm blood had made him choke.
Oh.
He stopped drinking it after.
That makes him choke.
Yeah, he stopped drinking it after 3 or 4 swallows, which is a lot of swallows. Now, if we're being honest. Now, what's strange is no one really asked him about cooking and eating her, which is what came up in the letter. Now, this was likely intentionally avoided because they didn't want the defense to use the insanity plea in the trial.
Okay.
So that's a little forethought. Now, quote, showing him the NYPCBA envelope that the Budd letter had been mailed in, Stein asked Fish where he had obtained it. The old man replied he had found a dozen or more on the shelf in the room at Frieda Schneider's boarding house. He said, I had some paper, but just ran short of envelopes. I wouldn't have known any were there. Only I was sitting in a chair one night and there was a roach on the wall, and I got up on the chair to kill the roach and saw the envelopes. So technically the roach is what got him nabbed because that
Thank
letter
God for
is what, yeah. Fish would share the locations of the body parts as well as walk the detectives through the crime scene. They found a human skull minus the jawbone. Its condition made it clear, even to an untrained eye, that it had been lying out in the woods for a long time. Its size made it equally clear that it was the skull of a young child. By now, Stein and King had uncovered enough bones, including the missing jaw, to satisfy themselves that they had located the corpus delicti, which is the concrete evidence of a murder, which is basically the body. Mm-hmm. It was time to notify the local authorities. He said, I didn't intend to kill her. I intended to kill her brother.
Honesty.
He would also admit that while kneeling on her chest and choking her, he had 2 emissions. He ejaculated twice. My allergies are beating my ass. Now, my allergies are kicking my ass. My nose is itching. So Fish was questioned countless times. He was recounting the story over and over again. At some point, the question of the other child murders came up because they were like, did he kill all the other kids too? There was Bill Gaffney. There was the McDonald boy. Now, Bill Gaffney went missing the year before Budd, and they had 0 leads. Who else did he harm? They started to dig deeper into Wisteria Cottage where they found Budd, and they uncovered 11 vertebrae, plus assorted bones like a pelvis, thighs, lower legs, upper arms, and hands. They believe that more human remains would be found. And in a letter to his defense attorney, James Dempsey, Fish wrote, quote, "Now, at the time of the Gaffney murder, Fish was a house painter in Brooklyn. This was 1927. Bill Gaffney was playing in the hallway of his apartment with his friends. Billy was 4 years old, and his friends were 12 and 3. When the 3-year-old was asked where Billy went, he said, the boogeyman took him. There was a public dumping ground on Riker Avenue in Astoria. So the letter began, all kinds of junk had been thrown there for years. He said, I will admit the motorman who positively identified me as getting off his car with a small boy was correct. I can tell you at the time, I was looking for a suitable place to do the job. Then he proceeded to the specifics. Not satisfied there, I brought him to Riker Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone, not far from where I took him. A few years ago, I painted this house for a man who owns it. He is in the auto wrecking business. I forgot his name, but my son Henry can tell you because he bought a car from him. The man's father lives in the house. Gene, John, Henry helped me paint the house. There were at the time a number of old autos along the road. I took Gene, my boy, there, stripped him naked. I'm sorry. I said Gene. Gaffney, sorry. I took Gaffney there, stripped him naked, tied his hands and feet, and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took the trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked from there home. Next day, about 2 p.m., I took tools, a good heavy cat o' nine tails, homemade. Okay. Etsy.
He's like homemade, by the way.
I sell them on
I
Etsy.
made this.
Short handle. Cut one of my belts in half. Slit these halves into 6 strips about 8 inches long, which is like, how the fuck big is this belt?
Right.
I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead by then. I stuck the knife in his belly. I held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old
vampire.
Yeah, he's wild. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones. Then I cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in grip. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below his belly button. Then through his legs about 2 inches below his behind. I put this in a grip with a lot of paper. I cut off his head, feet, arms, hands, and the legs below the knee. This I put in sacks weighed with stones, tied the ends and threw them into pools of slimy water. You will see all along the road going to North Beach water is 3 to 4 feet deep. They sank at once. I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked best, his monkey and peewees, and nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. It was good.
Not a recipe.
Yeah. And then he's like, it was good. The fuck? Then I split his cheeks. I split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his monkey and peewees, and washed them first. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when meat had roasted about a quarter of an hour, I poured about a pint of water over for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet, fat little behind did. I eat every bit of meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his peewees I could not chew. Threw them in the toilet.
Threw them in the toilet.
During the trial, he was calm and he was stoic until they mentioned the death penalty.
He's like, hold on now. Hold up.
Yo, what?
Y'all didn't say this before.
So you telling me I'm going to jail?
I gotta be
I'm
locked
going to
up for
hell?
this?
Yeah, nigga. So on March 25th, Albert was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to die in Sing Sing on April 29th.
Oh,
Another
Sing
Sing. In the end, no one would ever know the precise number of murders the old man had committed, but Fish had confessed to having violated as many as 25 or 30 boys every year, including girls. What a thrill it would be to die in the electric chair. He was basically saying, it will be the supreme thrill, the only one I haven't tried.
To die in the electric chair.
Oh,
He
Fish
should
would
have died before now.
Bitch. Fish would blame everyone else for his problems, from his wife. Tell old peg leg, your bitch of a mother, that I did. This is what he wrote to one of his kids. Tell old peg leg, your bitch of a mother, that the day I go into court and take the stand will be a sorry one for her.
Like, why old peg leg?
Exactly. One left him, his wife left him, so he's bitter. But then his son, he got pissed off at because he sent him a check, and that check was the reason why he got caught. He's like, indeed, for a person facing the prospect of the electric chair, he displayed a striking concern with financial matters, worrying obsessively over the whereabouts of John's monthly salary. I don't know where the money is going. All I got is John, All I got since John joined the CCC was $18 from October. There was $25 due to me in November. $25 from
Where's
December.
the fucking money?
Give me my money, man. $25 from December and fucking February. There was $25 from January that I haven't received. It was like, nigga, if you haven't been receiving any of these checks, why did you go back to the boarding house? He's like, one day I will get this check.
The one day I go back,
So
I get locked up.
Fish was supposed to be visited by Mrs. Gaffney, Bill Gaffney's mom, but he's a pussy, so he refused to have any visitors. At the time, Dempsey, who was his lawyer, filed an appeal because the prosecution during the trial, the prosecution had to prove that he was insane, and the defense had to prove that he was insane. So, quote, we do not have to prove that he is insane, Dempsey stressed. Rather, it is up to the state to prove that he is sane. Nevertheless, Dempsey declared the defense would offer proof, overwhelming proof, to demonstrate conclusively beyond any doubt that the man was insane in 1928 and is insane today. This is what's wild about this to me. Albert Fish's defense attorney had to basically prove that he was insane. But the burden of proof was on the prosecution, who had to prove that he was sane. So the state had to prove that he was sane. It's obvious that the man is nuts.
I was gonna say, how much time do y'all have to be sitting around trying to prove that he's sane? He's done nothing to prove that he is.
Yes. Now, Dempsey's side of things is perfectly frustrating because in Dempsey's eyes, he's like, who else eats shit but crazy people? But an insanity defense could lead to Albert Fish just being put in a hospital, and that's not what they felt like Albert Fish deserved.
Well, because he's already been there, hasn't he?
He's been there twice.
Like they deemed him not crazy.
They said that he was sane, and then that's what they did. They brought the Bellevue doctors, because ultimately the Bellevue doctors, they were like, "Yo, it's really the Bellevue doctors that fucked up because they should have never released him in the first place." This is true.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, to them, they were like, yo, I mean, at the time, we just thought he was an old pervert.
Yeah, but I mean,
it was like,
even if we thought he was a pervert, I think we still should have done some research.
Sure, but they didn't know that he was out there killing people. They just thought, it's kind of like you could be a sexual pervert.
He ain't take no x-rays?
No, they didn't take x-rays until he was arrested. Because they didn't know that he was, who would think that this old man would be sticking pins into his dick?
I just thought that they would have done some kind of medical examination and that an x-ray would be a part of it.
Yeah,
but maybe that's too modern.
Yeah, I think that is. So Dempsey was kind of pissed. Wortham, who was the prosecution, he was kind of like, I mean, this is kind of hard to prove that he's sane. But then at the same time,
like, he's not giving me much to work.
He's like, I got doctor's records that say that they claim that they thought he was sane. So now what Dempsey was trying to do was prove that he was insane he was trying to prove that he was insane to avoid the death penalty, because he's like, he's an old man was like, yeah, he's an old man child killer though. So,
and obviously he won't die. So
exactly.
I think we just got to kill him.
So he had a jury of 12 that believed even if he was insane, he still deserved to die. They were like, yo, that ain't got nothing to do with the price of tea in China. Quote, Dempsey pleaded for a reversal of Fisher's conviction on several grounds, including the prosecutor's literally bone-rattling display of the corpus delicti and the judge's definite hostility towards the defense. Primarily, however, Dempsey based his appeal on the seemingly self-evident argument that there was reasonable doubt as to Albert H. Fish's sanity. But on November 26, 1935, the Court of Appeals unanimously decided to uphold Fish's death sentence, and the execution was scheduled for January 13th, 1936, that week. At 11:09 p.m. at Sing Sing Prison, Albert Fish was executed by the electric chair. Quote, buttonholed by the reporters on the sidewalk outside the courthouse, one of the jurors revealed that most of them had in fact thought Fish was insane, but they felt he should be executed anyway.
Yeah, I think he should.
And that is Albert Fish.
That is one sick bastard. You know, there's so many details that I didn't know were there.
You're not close enough.
Jesus, I gotta be in the microphone.
Lip.
There were so many details that I never knew about.
Yeah.
And he's definitely way more sick than I thought.
Yeah, he's fucked up. He's fucked up. And you know, it was wild too, because as I was researching, there were so many other letters that he sent to like even his own kids, where he would.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, where he would talk about them beating him and like directing them on how he wanted to be beaten, and some of them, it was weird because there were a couple letters like from that he would like send to like his stepdaughter or some shit. I can't even remember who she was, but it would like walk that fine line of being like a creepy granddad. You know what I mean? Where it's like he would be precious about certain things, then he would just say something really off.
And but the crazy part about that was he never touched them.
He never touched them, no, but
he just wrote
they would touch him.
Yeah.
He would have them hit him and do shit to him.
Yeah.
And you know, his kids were actually at the trial. His son, Albert Jr., was like, fuck this dude. And Albert Fish was like, fuck you too. You know what I mean? The girls, they were a little more receptive to him. Oh, dad, and you know, pop, and all that other bullshit. But one of his kids actually apologized to I think it was either Grace Budd's mom or Gaffney's mom. One of the parents, she apologized for her father. She was like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't even know what the fuck to say. You know what I mean? And it was interesting too, because when the reporters came to the Budds, because mind you, the Budds, this is 6.5 years later, this man is finally being executed. When the reporters went to the Budds and they were like, yo, did you hear?
Yeah.
Your boy, not only is he caught, he been executed. The mom literally closed the door on him. She didn't even say shit. She closed the door on him. Because I think Delia Budd had just reached a point where she was just like, I just want to be left the fuck alone. Yeah. This has been a grueling process. She got reamed because she was doing all this false flagging and saying that people did it that didn't do it and all this other shit. She wasn't looking great in the press, but she had reached a point where she was just so fucking worn out that it was like, yeah, I care. It's been almost a decade though. You know what I mean? At some point, you're just like, good, cool, bad, fantastic. She closed the door on him. It's like, I hope to never see you motherfuckers ever again.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say I blame her.
Yeah. She's like, I got other kids that I got to raise, and I'm already feeling like I lost my mind.
She probably did.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Sad.
Albert Fish, y'all. That was Albert Fish. And that's not even nearly enough of it. I just didn't want to do 2 parts.
No, because he's been doing it. He was doing it for fucking like 40 years.
Yeah. 50 years. Yeah. 50 years because, well, he had been a career criminal for so fucking long, but what he did was he just like escalated, you know, because that's what always happens.
Yeah.
You know, we talk
boring and then
you got to spice it up a little bit. And you know, that happens a lot. You got somebody who's starting fires, pissing in the bed, you know, they do a lot of weird shit. They kill animals or whatever. There's always going to be a moment of escalation where it becomes more grandiose, where the psychopathy becomes even worse. And as an older gentleman, I think his psychopathy was going to degrade anyway, because as older people, older people mentally degrade.
Yeah.
Now, again, to me, he wasn't really that old, but the reality of it is too, is he was putting all types of foreign shit in his body, literally, that, that at the end of the day, like, he would have aged anyway, simply because he taken in all these fucking toxins.
I just don't
shit.
understand how he didn't die.
That's wild.
He was truly just fueled by evil.
There is a part of it too. I didn't write this in because I really didn't want to look deeper into it, but there is a part of it where people think that Albert Fish did not act alone. There was like this little brief rumor that when he picked up Grace Budd, there was another younger kid in a car that could have been like because he was a yegg, that could have been like his little companion. That could have been his son though too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like they claim they saw like a blue car that he was in, or that they saw around the house. And I'm like, well, he also admitted that he used to have his son drive him back to that cottage, which I'm like, you didn't think it was weird that your father kept going back to this old ass, decrepit ass house for no reason? Like,
yeah, part of me doesn't really believe that his kids were completely clueless.
Yeah.
I think they just didn't know how to handle
what to do. Yeah.
Because it's their father. But also it's like,
but I also think that
he's doing questionable shit.
Yeah, but I also think that they just thought too, he's only doing shit to himself.
Yeah.
Because all they know is about the flagellation, the masturbation, the pins, him drinking blood, him howling at the moon type shit. That's all they know. They don't really know that he's out there killing kids, but that one son did know about the neighbor who said that he basically kidnapped her kids and took his clothes off. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So there's like the creepy perverted. I mean, you wouldn't hope that it would get to this point, but even with all of the times that the press was like, let's talk to Albert Fish's family, they all said, not really surprised it got to this point.
I was going to say, even when they went and when they were on trial, no one truly sounds surprised.
No, nobody was.
She's like, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else to say.
Not to mention there was so many people on trial that was just like, yo, this dude is a fucking creep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's a weirdo.
I mean, but been a weirdo.
It ain't new. He been like this. He ain't new. I mean, at least he's consistent. Yeah. Well, there's that. There's always consistency. So, you all didn't enjoy it, but I hope you learned something. That's all I can say. Y'all stay sane out there. That's all we can say.
And don't trust all men that look like they are feeble and weak.
Yeah. Yeah, because, and that was the other thing too. Like they were really surprised at how strong he was. And I was like, yeah, he's strong, but he's also dealing with kids.
Yeah, I'm like, he's dealing with kids in the 1900s.
Yeah, it's like,
like their clothes are heavier than them.
Exactly. Shit. And not to mention the fact, let's be honest, crazy people are strong. So I don't know. I mean, there may be, I don't know if there's like a supernatural component to it too. Because part of me, when I was reading some of this, like the blood drinking and all that other shit, I was like, thinking. This motherfucker is kind of like on some cultish satanic shit a little bit.
I mean, he also did that whole yelling that he is Christ.
Yeah.
I think there was a part of him that just like connected him deeper to things than, the average human being.
Yeah, I think his just piety, the fact that he was just so fucking religious, I think people manifest this weird energy within themselves when they are so heavily into concepts like that.
Evil.
I mean, he was just evil as shit. So all right, y'all, well, this was wonderful. Enjoy your weekend. This was great. I gotta listen to this now, make sure that I'm probably not even, because I don't think I could deal. But I hope you all stay safe out there, and I hope you all take care of yourselves. And I'm going to go back to doing the work that pays me. So I'll see you all in 2 weeks. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. All right, y'all. Peace out.
Bye.